You're with the Retro Hour podcast, and it's time to welcome on this week's very special guest. Now, if you are a regular listener to the show, you know that Ravi and I hugely into the Amiga, really interested in the world of Atari as well, the 3DO. I've always had a bit of an affinity for the underdog consoles. Love my 3DO. And today we're going to talk to someone who's been involved in all of those and more as well, from the early days of coin-ops through the Atari ST, the attempted Atari buyout of the Amiga as well. Going to get some interesting stories about dealing with the Tramiels as well, hopefully. So let's welcome on this week's very special guest, Matt Householder. How's it going, Matt?
Going well. Glad to be with you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Face to face.
I appreciate you taking some time to hopefully share some of those stories from back in the day, do some reminiscing with us. I mean, one thing we always like to do with our guests is kind of take it back to day one and kind of find out where your entire journey began. I mean, do you remember what initially got you into video games? Do you remember the first time you ever even saw one?
I do recall the first time I saw one. It was when I was in college at Kent State University. And my wife and I would go to the laundromat to do our laundry. This would have been probably in 75 or early 76. And we saw a Pong machine in the corner of the laundromat. And what we used to do, though, was, take a Mastermind game set, one of those little, the Mastermind color peg puzzle. It's a logic puzzle. You solve the secret code. But we used to take that and play against one another. One day we said, well, got an extra quarter here, which is what you use to feed the dryers to dry your clothes. Let's drop it in this machine over here, this Pong machine, and try it out. And long story short, I was not impressed. I preferred dry clothing over Pong.
That was more entertaining.
Yeah, I'd rather watch the dryer go around and have dry clothing, dryer clothing, because for extra.
Yeah, it's quite therapeutic watching the dryer sometimes.
So not a fan of Pong. Did not like Pong. Did not impress me. Yeah, forget it.
I know you were like a keen arcade player later on as well, though. So
well, yeah, later there were some good games.
What stood out to you then, and what were you playing later on?
Later, I was going to college at another place and I was going to the University of Michigan Ann Arbor to get a degree in computer engineering. And I encountered Space Invaders in arcades there. I've been a fan of pinball since I was a kid, 10 years old or whenever, when I just found pinball for the first time. But, video games in an arcade was kind of a novelty at that point. This would have been 1977 or 78. I was going to college to get my undergrad degree in computer engineering and found a Space Invaders, and it had an incredible dramatic presentation as well as great audio and gameplay and kind of a wonderful story of you're defending the Earth against an invading array of monsters, Space Invaders. And as you would clear the rack, they would go faster and faster, and the audio would form a drum beat that would get faster and faster. And then, there's drama.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that you were studying to work in computers. I mean, so were you interested already then? Did you already have a plan to work in the technology sector then?
I did, but it developed kind of out of nothing or out of the blue to some degree. I'd always been a science nerd, math nut, and language nerd since I was in grade school. But my first encounter with computers was actually to play a game, and I disliked it. I don't think I've ever told anyone about this, but that was when I was in high school, maybe 1971 or 72, maybe. A local college, Findlay College, had a business unit where they taught using a computer. They taught simulation, business simulation, like economic modeling of kind of like game theory, where you'd have two companies or a number of companies competing for resources and market share of products, and they'd have to do price. Anyway, it was this business simulation, and they brought a bunch of us promising high school students and from different high schools and put us in a room and had us fill out random cards, and then they would go plug them in and give us the results, and we'd try to corner the market share and, try to become a monopoly, which is what, every good business wants to do, right? Is be a monopoly. That's how we make billionaires, but it's not how we make happy people. Anyway, I thought this was a load of crap and really detested it.
Wow, it's your first time in the arcade and the first time playing computer games. Not great experiences for you, it sounds like. So it's quite interesting that you ended up working in the industry though. So let's get into that. I mean, how did you, what kind of happened there? 'Cause you worked with Gaming Devices Incorporated. Tell us a bit about who they were then and how that happened for you.
Once I graduated with my engineering degree from Michigan, I was hired by Bell Labs and then moved to Chicago. And at this point I said, well, I want to go to Chicago because I know there's coin up in Chicago. And if I just hang around there enough, I'll get some opportunity to join that industry as a programmer designer. And, I probably should have just walked up to somebody's door and knocked on it. But instead I just took a job with Bell Labs and as a programmer for them. And they sent me to graduate school at Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois, right adjacent to Chicago. So I went to grad school for 1 year and got a master's degree in computer science. And in my final class there, I met a guy who was looking to hire a programmer into his company. He was VP of product development or VP of engineering, not sure what his title was. And he was in my programming class to do computer graphics. And I said, oh, yeah, I'm looking for a job. And he said, okay, well, and I interviewed, he made me an offer. And then, so the day I graduated with my master's degree, I called up Bell Labs and told them I'm not coming back to work there. Not that I intended to anyway. I hated that place. It was full of drones.
I was wondering then what GDI were making.
Well, GDI. Well, this guy was head of GDI engineering, and what they were making was a slot machines. GDI stood for Gaming Devices Incorporated. It was the slot machine division of Seeburg jukeboxes, which is also known as Xcor, XCOR. I'm not even sure you can find that online anymore, but it used to be a little history of Xcor. Anyway, they were also the owners of Williams Electronics, which they had previously spun off. And because they loaded them up with a bunch of debt and said, oh boy, let's give them this debt and get rid of it and watch them go out of business and take our debt with it. Lo and behold, Eugene Jarvis did Defender. And Williams took off like a rocket, of course. And Xcor Seeburg said, oh my God, we got to try that. So they said, let's take our slot machine division and make them a video game company. So they were staffing up with some people and developing hardware. So they hired me, and and they were licensing games from Japan, IRAM. They had licensed a game called Red Alert that you may have heard of. Red Alert, enemy aircraft approaching France, and it was not a really great game. But they also licensed another one called Ali Boo Chu, which is another oddball game, and sent me and the hardware engineer to Japan to help tune it up for the U.S. market. And we did that in, I guess that was in December of 81. Yeah. And it was, I think, released eventually, but I was supposed to be developing software with another programmer there, Chris Krull, who had preceded me there, we were supposed to be doing well, we were actually not only supposed to be, we were doing a, video poker machine. One of the first. It wasn't the first, but it was going to be yet another one in the new field of video poker.
And was that for home or arcades?
Oh, it was for Las Vegas and other legal gambling establishments and possibly some illegal gambling establishments. But Las Vegas controlled whether you could do it or not in Nevada. So the Nevada Gaming Commission controlled it. I mean, but so you had to get approval from them. You had to develop this product and show it to them and prove to them it was going to be fair and operatable and whatever. But we had a lot of trouble getting the hardware working properly, and then the company just, GDI did not fare well economically. And then Chris and I, especially me, could see the coin-op business dying. This was, spring of '82 by then. And it's like, I want to make a game. And so we started looking elsewhere, and we found a headhunter who got us an interview at Gottlieb.
But obviously, Gottlieb, they were well known for pinball tables. Before that, weren't they? Yes.
Yes, Gottlieb was pinball. Yeah, they invented the flipper. So we've interviewed there, and we're offered a job together as a pair of programmers, and the job was to make a game based on the movie that their parent company, Columbia Pictures, was producing and getting ready for release in some imminent time frame that wasn't predictable or known, but soon, like, okay. So we signed up to do that, and then that would have been in like April or May of '82.
I was wondering about because that was Krull, wasn't it? The
Croll, yeah, that was the movie and the game Krull. My first game, designed primarily by me and programmed by Chris Krull and me together.
I was wondering how many of the design assets did they provide, or did they provide any script or guidance towards the movie?
Yeah, they did provide a script, which I still have, and I can probably dig it out to hold up and show to you, but I don't know if that matters. But it's, it's a shooting script or some attempt at a shooting script. I'm not sure if it was final in any way or how final those kind of things ever are. But so I read through that. It was like 100 and some pages, and wrote down some notes, and put together some ideas for what out of that script we might be able to craft into a game.
And how did you make it kind of stand out from other coin-ops at the time? And what was it influenced by any other coin-ops as well?
Oh, absolutely influenced. I loved playing coin-op games, and so did Chris. And we would play a lot and compete against one another at GDI, and then later at Gottlieb. There was a great game room at Gottlieb full of recent hit coin-ops. Anyway, Defender was one of my favorites, but really it was Robotron. Was the control inspiration, move with the left stick, shoot with the right.
Yeah, this kind
run
of
one way,
controls.
shoot another, the ambidexterity of that. I loved Robotron. And so I insisted we had to do that. And it made sense that, you're trying to emulate a movie script of a hero, and then there's monsters trying to kill him or obstacles in the environment. And, he's going to throw a glaive. It's like, okay, how many glaives can he throw? Okay, 4. You decide what out of a script you're going to extract. And then, we came up with 5 sub games that we decided would fit well within a set of game utilities that we designed and wrote for this purpose.
I was wondering, did you ever go into an arcade and see anybody playing it and kind of just
playing Croll?
Yeah, and stand back and look at their reaction? Or...
Only in the last few years. going to retro game shows. I met some big fans of the Krull coin-op here in California a few years ago. And a guy named Robert Piscini, I think is his name. Anyway, he's in my my phone contacts, and he's got a Croll that he bought when the coin-op arcades were going out of business here, like 35, 40 years ago. He bought one. I signed it for him. He was very happy about that.
But would you ever consider getting one for your house, or haven't you got the room?
I have some coin-op arcade games. I have 4 of them in my garage: a Computer Space, a Defender, and a Robotron.
Wow, yeah.
And oddly, a Congo Bongo, but it's not, just happened to pick that up because it was a few blocks away and cheap.
Great collection to have, that is. Yeah.
Yeah. I do have a Croll set of boards, and but I don't have a cabinet. If I got a Cubert, I could retrofit it. It's the same, pretty much the same. Just have to get a control panel. And
we did mention then about the fact that guy acquired it when the arcades were going out of business there in North America, because obviously we had the legendary video games crash. It affected obviously the home systems as well. I mean, you actually moved to Atari, but this was after the crash, when Jack Tramiel, who formerly ran Commodore, had took over the company by that stage. So what took you to Jack Tramiel's Atari then? How did you get involved there?
Well, I actually was there before Jack by about a year, and survived the transition. There weren't many of us that did.
Because it got split, didn't it?
It got split into
Time
coin-op, and there was the coin-op was divided off. Jack Tramiel, the Tramiel family didn't want that, so they divided that off, and they kept the home computer and the home console division. And to build a home computer, the Atari ST. But so I went to Atari in '83. September of '83, after leaving Gottlieb, and joined their ColecoVision programming group and converted the Moon Patrol to the ColecoVision. All on my own, except for some of the music transcription. I did the art, the sound effects, and the design translation, which I reinterpreted to some degree from the original, and then wrote all the code. And finished it in like March of '84, but by then Atari was losing $1 million a day and rapidly going out of business. Nowadays, companies lose $10 million a day, and that doesn't matter as long as they have billion-dollar investors to prop them up and make them look like they're doing okay. Like the AI industry. So anyway, Atari was going out of business rapidly, and they halted manufacturing. This was after, E.T. and Pac-Man on the Atari 2600 had basically,
printed too many cards.
had basically destroyed the console business, but, not really. What destroyed
I think
was a combination of factors, but yeah.
They put more Pac-Man carts out than actual machines that were available at the time.
That's right.
So, huge demand.
Yes, that's correct. And I think ETs as well. They manufactured more ETs than.
What do you remember about Jack Tramiel coming in then? Because I mean, I heard the whole story that he got ousted from Commodore basically, and then he a lot of people said that he bought Atari really to get revenge on Commodore and kind of take them down. I mean, did you remember anything about that?
Oh, I believe that. I can tell you my experience with having been there during this period was, so after the ColecoVision project was shut down, I did not get my my shipping bonus because it didn't ship. I was not very happy about that, but they shuffled me off over into the coin-op division for a while. They took all of us over there. It was in Milpitas, and set me onto the Lorraine chipset, which was, as I came to find out later, what was the Amiga chipset. Atari had already signed a deal. This is pre-Jack Tramiel. Had signed a deal to license the use of it for maybe home computers and coin-op video games, I believe. I don't know the exact details, but I was given the technical documentation on it and said, here, read this, study this, and present a seminar to the engineers about this chipset, this Lorraine chipset. So I said, okay, I can do that. I did, and had a big meeting. I was like, who was this guy? I was nobody. They didn't know me. They just brought me into coin-op from somewhere else like a week ago. And here, so I present the analysis of what a great chipset it was and how wonderful it was going to be. It could, like, the blitter could draw the screen twice in a single video frame, things like that. It had the coprocessor, the copper list, the things it could do on the scan line basis, and and people were like completely dumbfounded. They realized that all these hardware guys were like, "What the hell? Where did this come from?" And it's like, well, I don't know. I'm just presenting this. They were kind of somewhat hostile at the end after my talk of how good this was going to be, and it wasn't invented at Atari. And all these guys were like, "Oh shit, I guess I'm going to get fired." And well, they were, but not because of that. Well, they were going to be split off when Tramiel's took over in a few months. It was already Atari was history. They just didn't know it yet.
So I'm interested, what was Atari planning on doing with the Amiga technology? I have heard stories about a prototype called the Mickey that was in development at Atari using the chips. Do you know anything about that? Any memories of that?
I did not see that. My contact was having presented, read the documentation, presenting the seminar, and then getting a really negative reaction from all my coworkers. And then I don't know how much longer it was after that. Oh, and then the Tramiels took over. I think that was in June or July, so this is like maybe just a week or two later. I'm not even sure the exact timing of all these events. That was a long time ago. But eventually, I was going to be deposed in a lawsuit regarding this Amiga licensing agreement, Amiga chipset, the Lorraine chipset, or whatever it was. And then I was called assigned a deposition date, time, and location to show up and be deposed on this. And then, so I drove to the deposition one day instead of going to work, and I get to the deposition place, and there's a hand-pasted piece of paper, handwritten, "Depositions have been canceled. Go back, go to work," or something. It's like, okay. In other words, the lawyers at Amiga and Atari and the Tramiels or whoever were suing one another at this point had settled and said, okay, we don't need to depose anybody. We're done. And I don't know the exact results of that, but what happened ultimately, of course, is that Commodore acquired the Amiga chipset.
Do you remember how Jack reacted to that?
I don't recall whether that was before he joined or if it was in some weird netherworld where, Atari had already gone out of business. I interacted with Jack and his sons a few times in meetings, and Leonard was my boss for a while, not immediately, but my boss's boss.
I was wondering then, when did you first hear about the ST, and was there an attitude of kind of like, well, we're gonna do it, and we're gonna get it out quicker and beat them to it?
I'm not sure when I heard about it, but I was certainly interested in working on it once I did. But the Tramiel group interviewed a number of us engineers and game designers, programmers, and artists, a few artists, to be hired into the new Atari US Corp. I mean, I didn't really know that I had technically been terminated from the old Atari. It's, I didn't get any "you are hereby fired" letter or anything, not that I recall. But, we were offered jobs, some of us, after being interviewed. And I think my interview was like maybe 10 minutes long, but, they had my resume. I'd only been there like a year. I'm sure I was cheap compared to most of the engineers. It's probably more capable than many of the engineers. I'll brag on myself, but anyway, I had skills that the Tramiels wanted, and they were not, they were good evaluators of people and people's abilities, I think. So they kept me, and a few others from the ColecoVision group. Well,
what did you think of Gem then? And were there lots of other influences taken from other operating systems at the time?
Well, Gem wasn't anything I'd heard of until we were basically assigned as an away team. A group of us engineers were sent to Monterey, California, to work at an offsite facility down there for several months, converting Gem to run on the Atari ST. And I think we saw a few demonstrations of it or read some documentation about it. And it's like, yeah, that's okay. That sounds cool. Kind of like the Lisa, operating system, or one of these other newfangled icon mouse GUI interface things. And so I went down there to work on the Polygon line draw primitives. Since I had already had experience programming in the original source language of Gem, which was 8086 family microprocessors, and I also knew 68,000 assembly language very well from having programmed at GDI on the 68,000. Well, I was a natural for converting code, and I'm sure they knew that from looking at my resume. It's like, oh, he knows 8086. Oh, and he knows 68,000. Oh, and he shipped a game. He designed and shipped a game in less than a year. So they knew I could produce. Anyway, so I went and did that down there. It was fun.
Yeah, because Gem, it was an operating system made by Digital Research.
That's correct. Digital Research. Yeah, Gary Kildall was the founder of the company based in Carmel. I'm not sure the exact headquarters, but it was down there, Carmel, Monterey. And Fort Ord was also there, U.S. military installation where they had a language school. I think Gary Kildall may have been there at some point in his career. Anyway, but I met Gary Kildall in a meeting once, which was kind of cool. He was like meeting Bill Gates, but before he was famous. And Gary Kildall was an interesting guy, but I guess he turned on IBM, supposedly, because he was out flying his airplane one day, and Bill Gates snapped up the contract to make the operating system.
You always hear that he's a man that could have been Bill Gates. Yeah. Yes,
could have been. CPM was anyway. So Gary Kildall his company was named Intergalactic Digital Research, I believe.
Yeah.
Originally shortened it to digital. But anyway, they had this Gem operating system, graphic environment manager, that they had developed, and it was functional and had some good capabilities. And we converted it to the ST in about, I don't know, it was like 3 months. A lot of it was written in C, so you just had to recompile things and then do machine-specific code to mate with that. Then get rid of all the machine specifics that you could out of the C once you discovered them. I think half the job was just finding machine dependencies in the C code. It's like, oh, we didn't realize that was processor specific. We'll have to cast this to that and unify these structures. And it's like, okay, great. I'll just write some assembly language that I make fast and efficient.
Well, I thought the Atari ST was great for that, because obviously the version of GEM that you created for the ST was called TOS, which a lot of people said stood for Tramiel Operating System. I don't know how true that kind of one.
Oh, that was what it was known as. Yeah, that's what we called it.
So the fact you did that in just 3 months, as you mentioned there, pretty mind-blowing. Yeah.
I think it was like 3 months. Yeah, I mean, it was ready for the January 1985 Consumer Electronics Show, I think is where it was debuted. And I had actually written one of the first applications in GEM or for GEM on the ST, and it was demonstrated at that show, although I didn't see it, I wasn't there. But it was a version of Breakout that I wrote in C in like a day, using mostly my rectangle routines, line draw routines. But I was testing out the GEM, they called it a desk accessory. It was something that could run and be live on your desk while other applications were running, and it would share the processor resources and all the screen resources and the mouse and everything. So I was testing out the whole capabilities of GEM with this one game. Like I said, I did Breakout.
One thing I remember around that time as well is that Apple and Digital Research had it was a lawsuit. I remember the look and feel. Basically, they accused GEM of copying the look of their operating system that ran on the Lisa, then the Mac. And I remember there was like a neutered version they released of GEM for PCs where they removed a lot of those elements. But I remember the Atari ST. Did you have to change anything then, or were you kind of immune to that then with your version of it? Do you remember?
I do not recall having to change anything for that purpose, but I do recall someone visiting my office who was not named. He was in some kind of official capacity. I think he was a lawyer for Microsoft. And he came to my office and had me run GEM on my development station on my it was basically an Atari ST that was done, basically manufactured, and it was an engineering version or whatever, I suppose, but had me run GEM. And then he had one extremely long pinky fingernail, which I remember. And I thought, what the fuck? And he said, okay, now move the cursor around. And he got up to it and put his eye like an inch away from the cursor and had me move it around on the screen. Okay, dude, with the cocaine fingernail. What the shit? And then after a couple minutes, he left. So who was that?
Did you ever find out what he was doing then?
I'm thinking he was he was some kind of Microsoft lawyer or some other nut that they had hired to do like a private investigator to like go in and do some kind of discovery for their lawsuit.
They might have had some patent on how the cursor moved or something. He was trying to see if you had that in there, yeah.
Yeah, some kind of like, what the hell is he doing? He's looking at the pixels. He's not going to see anything. That's how I knew he was a lawyer. But somebody had told me that, well, this is what somebody told me this day, which obviously was not true. Well, maybe it was. He said, oh, Bill Gates is here at 365 Borregas. That's not, and it's like, okay, he's here, huh? Well, maybe he brought this flunky with him. I don't know, and had him come up and look at it, but it wasn't Bill Gates.
I mean, it was a very fierce time in the industry in terms of, these new 16-bit systems were coming out. I imagine there was a lot of kind of looking over shoulders and companies trying to get each other with these patents and lawsuits and everything as well. I mean, obviously the Atari ST didn't make it onto market before the Amiga. I mean, do you remember much about that kind of period of bringing the ST onto the market then? Was it kind of a rush to get it out there before Commodore's machine?
I know I know everybody was in a hurry and everything was hurry. And it was, it was going along pretty well. And I did not enjoy, working at Atari at that point. For instance, there was no more free coffee or free donuts on Friday.
It's a deal breaker. Yeah.
It's like, what the hell? No free coffee. What, are you trying to sabotage your employee productivity? What? And there were no vending machines in the building because Jack Tramiel had gotten annoyed at the vending machine operator because he wanted a cut of the vending. So we would bring our own coffee. I would just bring an extra extra thermos, bring that into the office every day. Whatever, I don't care. And then other programmers started selling candy bars and things from their desk. So you'd go into like Dave Staugas's office and he'd have an array of candy bars there. And you go to Jim Eisenstein's office and he'd have a different set of things that he was selling.
So these little like kind of confectionery
black market, yeah.
Big up.
Black market, yeah. Oh, I don't know. It was just a weird place. It was very stressful and annoying, and there were certain people there that I absolutely detested at this point.
Is that why you kind of made a move for Epyx then? And
so yeah, well, the main reason I left, I could deal with these things. But the main thing was that Atari was not going to make games anymore. That was made clear. It's like, well, we're a computer company, and you did this computer software development, and all you guys did a great job, and hooray! Here you go. They had promised us a bonus for getting the getting GEM demonstrated by that January CES date, a bonus for all of us programmers. So we were called into a meeting once with everybody, just as the Atari ST was going to ship, I believe, or the ROMs had been finalized and they were going to go into manufacturing, and it was like a congratulations meeting. Hooray, everybody, you did a great job. Yeah. And it was around, everyone was talking like, yeah, happy. And then I raised my hand and said, hey, this is great. We're really happy that everything's turned out well. And I would like to know when we're getting our bonus checks. And it was like, oh my God, don't say that. My boss just about turned green and had a heart attack. And everyone looked at me like, what the? I think they expected me to be fired and carried out of the building, but that did not happen. A few weeks later, we got our bonus checks, and then I resigned because I wanted to do games. Yeah. I'd been cheated out of a bonus by Atari once already, and I didn't want to get cheated again. So I guess I'm kind of an asshole when I have to be.
Well, that's the thing, you've you got to do what you got to do, absolutely. And if games are always in your heart, and obviously Epyx were a great company to express yourself there and get back into working on games. I mean, how did you make the move there then? How did you get involved with Epyx?
Well, I think what happened was my buddy Jim Eisenstein, who also survived the Tramiel transition from the ColecoVision group, he was a programmer. He did the blit in GEM. The blitter is the block transfer, moving rectangles around really fast on the screen. He did the blit. His girlfriend at the time worked at Epyx. And I told Jim, hey, Jim, I want to get out of here and I want to do games. And he said, oh, my girlfriend says there's jobs at Epyx. So I applied, kind of got an interview through her to get a job at Epyx, and I applied. And they did not have a programming job. What they were selling was a job in project management. being, managing the development of games, making them good and on time and on budget for a variety of home computers, Commodore 64 and the Apple II being the principal ones at that time. So I took the job, and I took it because, I'd be working on more than one game at a time. So I came in and they had me work on 3 games at once in kind of a rush to get them done for Christmas selling season, which, was coming up fast. So I had Winter Games, a sequel to Summer Games 1 and Summer Games 2. Well, Summer Games and Summer Games 2. So Winter Games were being developed by an external team in Chicago, And in 2 internal games, one was G.I. Joe, and the other was Barbie. I think some of those may have been developed externally. Maybe part of Barbie was done externally. But so I was given these 3 games to finish and get out for Christmas. So, so I did. I made a few contributions to Winter Games, but nothing really important except make sure that it got done and that it was debugged and high quality. So worked with the developers back in Chicago. I flew there once to kind of work with them one-on-one during the final phase, and then they just kept throwing more games at me. How many can you handle? Okay, do some more. And then after finishing Winter Games, the reason Winter Games was sent out for production at Epyx is that none of the internal staff wanted to work on the game series games anymore. They were kind of headed up to here with Summer Games and Summer Games 2, especially following so closely on one another that they didn't want to program or do the art for it anymore. But so Winter Games was sent out to Action Graphics, was the company by name. And then marketing wanted a sequel to Winter Games and put together a kind of a brainstorming session with a bunch of us artists, programmers, marketing staff, sales staff, other such folks.
Was Chuck Somerville involved as well? We've had
Chuck
him on.
was involved.
Yeah,
yes.
We've had him on the podcast as well previously.
Yeah, and this was the brainstorming session that led to World Games, which I did much of the initial design and choosing the events on. So I was kind of not really the creator of this one so much as that team, that brainstorming session created it. But I kind of distilled it into this, well, it's going to be like the Wide World of Sports, American TV show from the 60s that was popular when I was a kid, where it would be, events spanning the globe, as, or you see the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. I don't know if you're familiar with that TV show or not, but it was always.
I guess it would be.
The sports were a little odd.
It'd be like obscure satellite channels for us in the past, where you'd just be like, "What is this?" Or
ABC's Wide World of Sports.
Yeah.
That's what it was. ABC's well, that's Disney now, but anyway, ABC's Wide World of Sports. So I said, well, let's use that as a model for this sequel, and we'll get a sponsor that's an airline company where you're flying around the world to do these sports in the locations where they're at. So that was kind of also the structure there, and it actually had a sponsor. I think it was Continental Airlines, if I'm remembering right. A U.S. airline. I don't think they flew outside Canada even, but I don't think they flew.
But you had the caber toss in there and stuff.
Yeah,
like
I don't think they flew to Scotland. So we had a bunch of, we came up with a bunch of wacky events. I think I came up with half of them, and I designed or did a prototype design and speccing on how some of these things were going to work. But mostly I couldn't do much because I had a lot to do, but I would say, okay, here's going to be these events and it's going to be structured like this. Let's try to get a sponsor, an airline. Marketing found a sponsor, and cliff diving, caber toss, sumo wrestling, weightlifting, bull riding, probably forgetting a few, barrel jumping, log rolling in Canada, log rolling. Anyway, we did a lot of humor in it. We did all the art internally at Epyx. But we had the game code done by a company outside of Detroit, Michigan. So we'd have to send the art to them, and I'd manage them remotely to do the implementation of the World Games events. So there was a lot of email didn't exist, lots of faxes, writing letters, printing them out, and then faxing them back and forth. And then they would deliver things to me by putting them on an airplane flight from Detroit as baggage.
Right.
To me, and I'd pick it up out at the airport and then bring it to the office and test it, floppy disk. Well, these are wacky stories, I suppose, but
it's interesting to hear. Yeah, absolutely.
But that's how things were. I mean, you couldn't afford to FedEx something. You couldn't FedEx something in 1986, 85. Not really. I guess you could. Well, that was a famous thing. Was Atari wasted so much money they would FedEx things across the street. No,
it's insane.
They would just. That's how they lost $1 million a day. They were FedExing things across the street.
Yeah, that's nuts. Well, I mean, yeah, working on the game series, I mean, that they were obviously huge for Epyx, and then that kind of, peaked with California Games that came out in 1987. Yeah.
Yeah, California Games was the big hit, and that was created by my wife and I in the summer of 1986 when I was wrapping up World Games, and we were walking around on a Saturday morning going to breakfast at a local breakfast restaurant, and walking down Lisbon Street where we lived. There was a hill, and we're walking down the sidewalk, and this clattering noise comes by us on the street, and it's like we look over, and it's a young man on a skateboard. And Candy looks at me and says, you should do a game with skateboarding in it. I said, you're right. And it should have surfing and frisbee and hacky sack and roller skating and BMX biking. And like within 5 minutes, as we finished walking to breakfast, I had basically created the concept that I later pitched them at Epyx. Silly. It was because I could have kept the concept and gone to EA and made a lot more. But
it was interesting because quite a lot of these games were quite niche, hacky sack and stuff we'd not really heard of, and then seeing that in a video game was and highlighted was really, really something cool and something exotic,
Yeah. I mean, my wife and I were both, Ohioans, and we'd moved to California just a few years before. And for us, California was always this crazy place where the cool stuff came from. You're like, they've got hula hoops and super balls, Whammo. They've got frisbees there. Frisbee was a Whammo product. And California, that's where they make all that cool stuff. Skateboards, they make skateboards in California. Oh, surfboards, they have surfing. So all of this alternative sports stuff, from our perspective mentally, was that's California. So as transplants, we were kind of, tuned to that. And, people, if you soaked in it out here, you probably wouldn't realize that people from outside California would not, would look upon that stuff as something cool and out of the ordinary.
Interestingly, Epyx were also developing the Lynx, which then later on became the Atari Lynx. And that was Dave Needle and RJ Michael as well. I was wondering what your memories of that are, because California Games, of course, was the big kind of title on there that I really remember the Lynx having.
Well, yeah, it was the pack-in title for the Lynx. It was Epyx's biggest hit. It sold millions of copies worldwide on a variety of formats. And, helped fuel the growth of the growth of Epyx from like 35 people when I joined in 85 to like 300 by the time I'd left. But, it was a venture capitalist fueled expansion, and they were hoping to get their money out of it. And then the acquisition of the Lynx development by RJ and Dave Needle, and David Morse. I think he was one of the board members or he was one of the board members, I think, of Epyx at the time. I didn't know him, but I met these people later when they came in after I was done with California games and trying to move on to more games for Epyx. But by this point, I had already been like wrung out like a wet sponge. Is the way I think about it, by the experience there at Epyx, working on so many products so hard so intently for 3 years, and then not really receiving a substantial monetary or other reward for it. I mean, for instance, the programmers on California games were under a royalty system, but I was not, even though I created the game and managed and did a lot of the creative design on it. I also insisted I hired many of the people that worked on it, helped find them and hire them. I also selected the music that appeared in it, Louie Louie, and that mangled version of Wipeout that we put into it, because they wouldn't let me license 2 pieces of music. You can only have one, Matt. And I said, okay, it's Louie Louie. We'll just do it that. But, I didn't get any royalties from that. I got a salary, and I got some kind of stock options that ended up being worthless, of course, and as things turned out. But, Chuck Somerville and all the other programmers made tons of money in royalties on California games, which is fine. They should. So should I, but I didn't.
Obviously, things didn't end too well for Epyx with them filing Chapter 11, bankruptcy in 1989. I mean, was your next move to 3DO then? How did you get involved in that company? Because obviously, at the time, I know Trip Hawkins famously, that was his next big venture after Electronic Arts. It must have seemed very exciting at the time then, 3DO.
Yeah, I mean, I was not happy at Epyx, so I basically, when they presented me the idea of like, oh, we're going to do this handheld game system handy, and I said, oh, okay, gee, I did a little back of the envelope calculation. I'm no business genius, but I'm not, I'm an engineer. I know how to add and multiply, and I know what the budgets have to be. And I just said, there is no way Epyx can afford to manufacture and market a handheld game system that's going to compete with Nintendo and their Game Boy, even if it is color. And then when I found out that it ate batteries like potato chips, it was like, what?
Yeah, you needed that add-on at the side, didn't you, on your belt? Yeah.
And it's like, what? Anyway. I lost all faith, plus I was just burnt out and bitter, I suppose, at that point. I'm not bitter now. Not at all. Look how I'm smiling. Because it's such a big entertainment for me now. But yeah, they basically dug their own graves, and I didn't want to be in it. So I quit. I see it as a kind of a venture capital Hail Mary, and they failed. I don't think RJ and Dave Needle failed, but the business part of it failed. It was also too expensive. I mean, you look at all the things. Anyway, and the same thing happened with the 3DO, honestly. but for different reasons, I suppose. It was again, but this was Trip Hawkins' baby. I think what happened there was, from my perspective, the company I was working at the time, DTMC, was going out of business. We were a Super Nintendo and Genesis and Game Boy publisher based in Hong Kong with a U.S. office, and I was their VP of engineering, product development, whatever you want to call it. And we were going out of business. I had a daughter and who was little, and we needed health insurance, and there was no such thing as Obamacare yet. So I needed health insurance. So I found, what can I get? Where can I go? I've looked at a few options, and 3DO was an option. And I said, okay, I'll take it. So I took the job. I wasn't particularly interested in it. I already figured that 3DO was a failure. It had already gone public, I think, and stock had dropped to like $3 a share. That was the 3DO, $3. Like an IPO was like $20 a share. Don't quote me. I don't even remember, but it was now like way underwater, and forget it. I mean, unless you had tons of shares and as a founder or something, you weren't going to see any value out of that stock either. So it was, again, too expensive and kind of just didn't have a proper structure to it the way it is being marketed. It was, not the marketing. It was all being left to the different manufacturers.
Yes, because there's several companies manufactured the consoles. Yeah,
several companies manufacturing it. It was, anyway. My time at 3DO was not that enjoyable, but
do you remember anything behind the scenes about the successor to the 3DO, the M2? So I know that was in development.
Well, the M2 certainly, I was involved in that.
Tell us your memories about that.
Enough. Well, I was working in the studio, which was the internal studio that would develop games for the 3DO multiplayer, and so I was constantly looking for developers or people who I already knew as developers to do work on the 3DO, to develop products for the studio. And I knew that the M2 was coming down the line, the Mark II version of the 3DO multiplayer, and it was going to be high performance, real 3D system. And Trip Hawkins wanted some games on it. And I'd always been interested in sports games, and I knew a developer who had done a number of football games. And that developer was Condor, who I had known for almost 10 years at this point, Max and Eric Schaefer anyway. Maybe not quite 10 years, but I'd given them a lot of advice and even helped them find a really good musician by the name of Matt Ullman, who did all the music in Diablo and Diablo 2. So I had a good relationship with them, and they had done some football games in the past on the Game Gear and the game, I think it was on the Game Gear and the Sega Genesis, I believe. Anyway, so I went to them with an idea. I said, hey, I want you to build a game for the M2. And the code name for it is NFL Jam, like the NBA Jam coin-op that had already been out. I said, it's going to be, small number of players, lots of action, and you're going to be passing, and, it's going to be cool, 3D with a big stadium, and the camera can orbit around, and 3D model characters, and blah, blah, blah. And they said, okay, we'll write up this proposal for you. And so I got the proposal from them, and I pitched it as a project. And Trip Hawkins said, yeah, let's do it. So we signed them up, and this would have been in probably, I guess, in late 95. And they began working on it. They were making a lot of good progress with just two people doing M2 football, is kind of what we called it internally, M2 football. But the M2 hardware didn't make good progress, but, then they had a version of the M2 hardware so they could work on it. But we had a number of deliverables to deliver them, and then they would deliver things to us, and then we pay them on milestone schedules. And ultimately what happened was they made great progress and they were showing cool stuff, but it wasn't really meeting the milestones. So I would rewrite the milestones for them so that they could meet them, so they could get some money to keep going. And it turns out that what they really needed, because they were working on Diablo at the time, what they really needed was money to keep working on Diablo, because they couldn't pay their employees' salaries without money from somewhere, and Blizzard wasn't paying them enough. It was weird. There was a period of time where more money went through me to pay for Diablo than from Blizzard to pay for Diablo.
Pretty amazing, because it was a really long length journey of development for Diablo. We had David Brevik on the podcast, and it's glad. I bet you were kind of relieved when it eventually came out and you got on board. And
I was very happy because I could.
It became a thing.
I could leave 3DO and join something that was a hit. I mean, I knew a hit.
Yeah.
The first time I saw anything about it was when I was working at this company before 3DO. Max and Eric came to me and said, "Hey, Matt, we got this proposal. It's called Diablo." And I read it over and I said, "Wow, this sounds really cool, Max and Eric. Don't pitch it to us because we're going out of business. You don't want to get this locked up with somebody that's going bankrupt. I'm not even telling anybody that you showed me this for fear that lawyers will latch onto it as some kind of lifeline. Anyway, to suck the blood out of it, so to speak." So,
and I guess that then they really trusted you as well, because you were honest with them.
they trusted me, and I'd helped them on and off. I'd given them some work at this company DTMC to convert their game Gordo 106, the mutated lab monkey, to the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, which did not finish, but they got some payment, and I gave them a lot of good advice. And like I said, I also helped them find Matt Ullman, their musician. And then I was their lifeline during some of this Diablo period where they were scraping the bottom of the barrel to try to keep the doors open. And ultimately, they did hire me. Just before Diablo shipped, I came in and did some work on Diablo and was made a producer for their ongoing efforts in the Diablo universe, for Diablo follow-on products like Hellfire and the PlayStation version of Diablo and all the licensed properties other than that, like books and strategy guides, and then ultimately Diablo 2. And I also was their main recruiter and manager of the sound department too. I did most of the recruiting for the people who built Diablo 2. I found and hired a majority of them, I believe.
Such classic games, and we've had quite a lot of developers because of that huge development period that have come in and out and
it was a long
been involved.
Time.
It's
97 to 2000, like a 3-year cycle. Not really long when you think about it in modern terms.
But from when the idea was pitched,
Yeah.
Well, Matt, what are you up to these days?
I repair audio equipment. I'm an electrical engineer, and I know analog, and I can solder, and I can read a schematic and solve puzzles and source parts and do all of that sort of thing. So I enjoy repairing turntables, amplifiers, cassette decks, speakers. I have no employees, no commute, no boss.
Sounds bliss.
And if I don't like it, I fire them.
Yeah.
It sounds like a very therapeutic kind of job, actually.
Yeah, I like it. I like to fix things. I mean, I always saw my job as kind of like fixing things anyway. It's like, how do I fix this? How do I make this work? How do I take what's wrong with it and make it dramatically better quickly?
Yeah.
Debugging's like that. Finally a product and determining, how to get it done quickly and with the quality level required, and how to make sure that the money is there to be able to do another one.
Yeah, well, Matt, it's been an incredible journey with you over the last hour. Some huge companies and products that you've worked on as well. So really appreciate you coming on and spending some time sharing your story with us. Thanks again for being our guest this week.
Happy to be here. Thank you.